What are the hottest use cases?
The hottest use cases depends what we mean by hot. What makes people money currently? A lot of just customer support, some sales, recruiting. Yeah, those are the use cases that I see working really well in production. Anything that is just like automating call centers. Something that I'm excited about is like the insurance space. There's some startups that are working on that. Insurance is very annoying, and if you could automate that with an agent, that'd be very cool. Personally, I'm just really excited for us to push the boundaries of this stuff. Like, I think automating customer support is great, but let's build the future.
I'm excited to hear from Elizabeth at Vapi today. We've been working with Vapi a really long time. They build really cool stuff. I often recommend Vapi as a place to get started and a place to grow if you're a voice AI developer. Some of the stuff we talked about in scripting and workflow just a few minutes ago, they've done a bunch of innovative work in. They've got a very complete stack for voice AI. And Elizabeth is going to tell us about the company and who their customers are, and I think show us a little demo. And then, as usual, we'll do the Q&A. Please do most of the Q&A if you can remember in the Discord channel, because that way it persists. We can get Elizabeth to come back later and answer more questions. We can do the threading. So we'll post the Discord link and nudge people to it in the Zoom chat as usual. I think that's my intro. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. I will throw it to you.
Sweet. Thank you for having me and thank you for doing this course. Very much needed. So my background is I do developer relations at Vapi, and I actually joined very recently, which just a few weeks ago. And so I'm pretty new to the voice space, but I'll tell you, like, the reason why I joined Vapi is because of voice. I think voice is the modality by which like we can really take LLMs to basically like the entire world and really distribute them. And so I just like personally I'm just very excited about having this be in everybody's first developer stack and also just as a consumer product. I think when people can talk to things that they will. And so I'm just psyched for that future. And about you, it's like we make it as simple as freaking possible. And so the way that Vapi started actually was Nikhil and Jordan, the founders, were building an AI therapist for a while in the form of a voice agent. And they tried to build like the end-to-end voice agent and then tried to scale it and realized that it was really hard to do that and that other people were struggling to do that as well. There was just no good infrastructure for this a year and a half ago, a year ago. And so that's how like they started Vapi because sell the shovel. So we've come a very long way since then, and we've made it very easy to both, as Quinn mentioned, get started on Vapi. So if you just want to build an agent, it takes like less than 5 minutes to start in the dashboard or make an API request. And then we also have scaled customers to like millions and millions of calls. And yeah, so actually about workflows, where we launched a workflows feature about a month ago, but have spent the last month really improving it because it's such a huge part of like enterprise use cases. I think that in evals is like the most important thing right now. And we're thinking about both, but workflows especially right now. And we're about to launch a much better version of it that will be very usable. And we are hoping that it becomes one of the, not just something that, so right now, the way that people get started on Vapi usually is they first build an agent and then they start adding tools to it and then maybe they'll build it into a workflow. We want to restructure that and we want people to start thinking about agents through workflows. So like the initial entry point is a workflow. Yeah, so very excited about that. And on the eval side, I'm thinking a lot about how to actually eval the voice and not just the transcript. Because right now, most solutions out there are evaluating the transcript after a call rather than the voice within the call. And I think voice is equally as important because there's a lot of nuance that a transcript doesn't capture. Yeah, so that's a brief overview. I'll quickly demo our dashboard. So the way that Vapi's built, we were built to be API first. The API is very, very extensive and you can do so many different things with it. I think it is probably the most comprehensive in terms of feature set for building voice agents. And we've built the dashboard on top of that. to make it easier for people to either get started, or if you just prefer a no-code environment, yeah, the dashboard makes it a little bit easier. So I'll walk you through that, but then everything you see me do in the dashboard can obviously be done in the API. So this is what it looks like. And the core part of Vapi is an agent, an assistant. We call it assistant. And when you sign up, you land on the assistance page, and then creating an assistant, there's a ton of different templates that you can use. These are pretty well done with the prompt, and some of them have tools if you want to explore that. But basically, this page lets you like fully configure your assistant, and including like the LM, the transcriber, the voice model, give it tools. So we have about 10 built-in tools, including external integrations and things like transferring calls, ending a call, and you can give access to your assistant. You can give access to that in the tools configuration. Recently, we added the MCP tool, which is just a client. So we built a client into Vapi, and you can access, or you can call any MCP server through the client. Yeah, you can explore the rest of it on your own, but basically we've made this very like end-to-end comprehensive. So you can do analysis, you can configure the analysis of the conversations that your agent has, figure how the agent starts speaking, how it stops speaking, etc. So this is the workflows feature that I talked about. I would encourage you to start trying this in about a week or so once the new version is launched. I think this one is good, but it will be much better. But yeah, it's just you can control the way that your agent behaves, like very from a logic perspective. So there's a bunch of different actions that your agent can take, and then in the between the actions, you can both have logic, so like true or false statements, or you can have an AI logic gate, which the LLM will determine what the most appropriate next step is. And then there's the phone numbers. On sign up, you get 10 new free phone numbers. So we just provide the telephony for you to make it as simple as possible to try out making a call and receiving a call. So there's both inbound and outbound here for placing calls and then receiving them, and you can assign an agent to both. And as I mentioned previously, tools. So there's a ton of different tools here. MCP, I think, is one of the most interesting ones. I won't go through the rest of this. Oh, one important thing is we integrate with all of the model providers. It's very comprehensive. Like we've included, I think, all of the providers that are out there, and we provide models out of the box. But if you want to bring your own voice, like for example, let's say you code your voice with 11 Labs and you want to bring that in, you can do that by passing your API key in the external provider keys tab. And so the other two important things for like really building end to end and improving your agents is testing. So we have test suites where you can create different test cases to both load test and just test your agents to see how they behave in different situations and how you can improve the prompt. And then we also log every single conversation. Every conversation has a transcript, the audio recording, and the tool calls that were made in the conversation, and a summary and an analysis of the conversation. Yeah, I think that's about it in terms of the dashboard. Yeah, again, everything that you can do here, you can do in the API if that's what you prefer. I'll quickly just show you like in the dashboard. I'll actually give this access to Zapier and show you how the MCP works.
Hi there, this is Alex from Tech Solutions Customer Support. How can I help you today?
See, can you list what MCP tools you have available?
Hold on a sec. It seems there was an issue retrieving the available MCP tools. However, I can assist you with.
I think I have the wrong API key in here. Let me to croc.
Hi there, this is Alex from Tech Solutions Customer Support. How can I help you today?
Gee, could you list what tools you have available from Grok?
I think you meant Alex. I can't provide a list of tools directly, but I can help with various tasks like text to speech, speech to
What
text.
tools do you have available to you?
I can use various tools to help with tasks like generating speech from text, transcribing audio, analyzing images, and searching for information online. If you have something specific in mind, just let me know.
Can you search for news about Canada with the Grok tool that you have available?
One moment. I found some recent news about Canada. Here are a few highlights. Asterisk politics and economy discussions are ongoing about the 2025 federal election. There,
Okay. So that's news about Canada. I'm actually Canadian and I don't know anything about news about Canada. News about Canada, so it's very relevant. But so that was just using Grok. They released a new model that searches the web, and we were playing around with their MCP server. So yeah, that's an example of that. Now open to questions.
Lots of good questions in the Discord. I want to know about the $20,000 challenge first, though. We might have buried the lead.
That's right. Yes. So I was going to end with that. But what we're doing this month is the Vapi Build Challenge. And that's basically the prize pool is $20,000. The top prize is $10,000 for, I believe, the most creative use case. And then there's two more for each $5,000 for technically challenging. And then there's 5 by 1,000 prizes for community winners. And so basically what we're looking there is for you to build like a really good agent. I think that we can really start pushing like what agents are capable of. I think that we can go outside of customer support, and I and the team are just like very excited to see what people can build. So the deadline for the challenge is at the end of the month. So you have 3 weeks, which should be more than enough to build something really great. My friends are all competing in this because 10K is a lot. And yeah, we'll announce the winners shortly after. Yeah.
Everybody's eligible? Are there any like geographic restrictions?
No, it's just if you build an agent, that's submit it through our form and then post it on social media. We have a hashtag, and I think it's Vapi Build Challenge or it's Build with Vapi. And if you post with that, submit it, you're in.
And people always ask me this when we organize hackathons. Is it $10,000 in cash or $10,000 in Vapi credits?
Oh no, it's $10,000 in cash. Yeah.
I thought it was really funny last time we organized a hackathon and had pretty big prizes. I got so many people asking, is this just credits or is it cash? And I was like, I wouldn't have said it was a prize if it was just credits in quite that way.
But we'll also do credits. Like, if you are building a company, we have a startups program, which if you qualify, you get a large amount of credits that you can use for building out your systems. And if you build out a product and decide that you want to build a company from that, we're more than happy to support with credits as well. But yes, the prize is cash.
And was the voice there Jordan's voice, the Vapi co-founder?
Yes, it was. So it's funny, I was joking today. We've been thinking about cloning because Cartesia just came out with a new cloning model. They always had voice cloning, but they've now come out with the professional version. And so we were chatting about that and talking about Jordan's voice. And it's funny because a lot of people use that as the default just because it's the default that we provide both in the API and the dashboard. And I wonder how many first calls people get around the world with Jordan's voice, and second, how many scams there are with Jordan's voice. It's a funny thought, but yeah, it is Jordan's voice, the CEO. And then if you go to our landing page at vapi.ai and click the Talk to Vapi button, that's also using Jordan's voice and Daily Under the Hood. So
yeah, there's a question about how Vapi and Pipecast are related. The Vapi orchestration stuff is all built in-house. So we've shared lots of ideas over time, back and forth, and Vapi runs WebRTC on top of Daily, but all the orchestration stuff is totally the Vapi team's engineering work.
yeah, we were the first ones to build out the orchestration for voice agents. So this predated Pipecast, and so it wasn't built on Pipecast. Yeah.
What's the best speech-to-text LLM and text-to-speech stack, in your opinion? Or is there one you recommend, or how do you advise people? That was a question that I thought was worth leading off with in the Discord.
So it's interesting, like we always get these providers messaging us being like, oh, can we be the default? Can we be the default? Objectively, I care about what's on artificial analysis and what the best model is. As of right now, like our default is DeepGram for the speech to text, their newest model, and then for text to speech. So the Vapi voices use 11 labs under the hood, but one of my current projects is to fine tune one of the open source models with our voices because I have a hypothesis that if I fine tune on a lot of data, the quality of the voice might be even better. We usually suggest Vapi voices as the default just because we worked pretty hard on making them great for, especially for enterprise use cases. And then the other, like DeepGram and Cartesia are good for text to speech as well. Rhyme's new model is really good at pronouncing, like pronunciation, which I found. And Assembly's model is pretty good as well. Yeah, I think each one is good at slightly different things, but right now our default is the Vapi voices, and then after that, DeepGram and Cartesia.
And what about LLMs? What do you see people using most often in production?
So this is an interesting one. Similarly, there are LLM providers that are wanting to be the default, but again, like the thing that matters the most is the latency as of right now. If your LLM is taking long, I just can't, like it just doesn't make sense to run a voice agent because if it takes more than 600 milliseconds for the agent to get back, then the person has their next thought. And so that's how we think about it. Like it has to be within the 600 milliseconds or around there so that the person doesn't have enough time to have their next thought and then think about, oh, like this is slow. Again, we're trying to like make these experiences as seamless as possible. So as of right now, the default is 4.0, just because the quality of the model, the latency, it's the fastest for like the trade-off between latency and quality of the model makes most sense. 4.0 mini is obviously faster, but then you get a pretty large reduction in the quality of the model. And then the other thing is cost. It's all the models have different pricing. Claude, for example, is a little bit more expensive and has a slightly higher latency. Yeah, so basically we recommend 4.0.
Do you see people moving to Gemini 2.0 Flash?
No, I think right now most people use 4.0. Yeah, but just because there's a reduction in quality for Flash, in the quality of the conversation. Yeah. But so there's different parts of Vapi that also use models. For example, we use models for the summary and the analysis, and then within workflows, the AI logic uses a model, and we're constantly thinking about what is the best experience. But yeah, the most important thing is just like trade-off between latency and quality. Yeah.
There's some questions about handling multiple languages, and there's a lot of talk in this group over the last week or so about multiple languages, both handling different languages for different customers and sometimes about mixing languages in one call. How do you support languages?
So we support anything that the models support. There are several providers that have multilingual models that will transcribe in different languages. So basically anything that, and then 11 Labs has models that in all the different languages, any multilingual function that the models support, we will support out of the box.
And for, okay, so it's like there's a subset of the models that you recommend to people if they're doing specific language. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Somebody's asking what's the best tool calling example? Like if somebody is getting started on Vapi with tool calling, what example do you point them to? And we can come back and post a link in the Discord if you want to.
Yeah. So the use case that I find for like production use cases for tool calling is scheduling is a big one, for example. If you have an agent that is either, for example, qualifying leads, like a sales agent, they can have access to a Google Calendar and then make API requests to that, get available times, and then schedule a call with the user, with an actual member of the team. So my favorite way to use tools is with Zapier, just because, and we don't have a partnership with anything, and this is not, I would say this because I think it's really useful in connecting to their MCP server, because on their end, you can enable all of the tools that you want the Zapier MCP server to have access to. And of course, Zapier has all of the integrations you can possibly think of. And so if you give access to the Zapier's MCP server to our client, you basically get access to any tool that you want. And it's just the easiest way to do it. So I really like that. Yeah.
So the recommendation these days is to use MCP servers for function calling, for tools?
So if you just want to give your agent access to a bunch of different tools, yes, I would use the Zapier MCP or Composio as well. If you're giving specific tools, for example, if you want to use your own API, you can use function calling, or if you want a native integration into Google Calendar, we also support that natively. We have native integrations with them, but that predated MCP, which is why it's there. Yeah.
And I think sometimes people use function calling and tool calling interchangeably. And there's another question that's related to this. Are custom functions getting replaced by tools? If we're generating assistance via the API, should we create the tool first and assign it to the agent, or can we add the tools in real time during the assistant startup using the API?
If you want your agent to have access to a tool, you have to add that in either when creating the agent or so when you're creating a call with Vapi, you can pass assistant overrides. So like you have your assistant that you create, and when you make a call, if you want to give it access to tools at that point, you can set the assistant overrides object and then pass in new tools for that specific call if that's what you're asking.
And this may be like some back and forth in the Discord because there's several questions that revolve around how to use tools most effectively. So maybe we'll put a pin in that and come back to it, or come back to it async in the Discord. Somebody's saying, I don't see pre-made tools in my account. Do I need to have a paid subscription to see them?
You should, if you go to create tool, if you go to the tools and then create tool, you should have a list of the tools that we have available. If you're not seeing that, that is probably a bug then on our end, and I'll respond to you in the Discord so we can sort it out. Yeah. I'll also look through all of this afterwards to make sure that I follow up on everything.
There's a lot of good stuff in the Discord. Very long prompts create latency and instruction following problems. This is something we're all familiar with and we'll continue to talk about. So somebody's asking about workflows versus squads. When do you showed the new workflow stuff. When do you use workflows? When do you use squads? Do you want to just give a very quick overview of what squads are?
Yeah, so squads is adding multiple agents into one conversation. Little secret, we're killing squads and workflows is replacing squads. Once we launch V2 of workflows, or really V1, because I think V0 could have been much better, just from the feedback that we got. Once we launch this new version, it'll fully replace squads, and you'll be able to have multiple agents in one conversation with workflows.
We're all figuring out how to build this stuff with these new patterns. It's really fun. Is there a way to resume a specific call that gets disconnected? So you have a call, you have the sort of context built up, the call gets disconnected. Can you restart it?
Yes. So the way that you would restart it is if you want to, you can call the person back with the context of the previous conversation. And how you would do that is after every on-call end, you get a full transcript of the summary, the full transcript of the conversation and a summary. And you can make an API request to get that information. And then you can restart a call by placing an outbound call to that person with the context of the previous conversation and prompt the agent to make sure that it understands that there was a previous conversation, the call was disconnected, you are now recalling the person and trying to continue where you left off. And this is going to be much easier with workflows as well.
Somebody's saying they're using Twilio numbers ported to Vapi, but they only want Vapi to answer certain calls. How would you design that?
Interesting.
Yeah, that was my reaction when I read this as well.
That almost sounds like a Twiml thing to me. I don't know.
But if the numbers, that was my thought too, but if the number's been ported to Vapi, it always, it's not a Twilio number anymore, maybe.
No, it would still be a Twilio number. It would still be a Twilio number. I think you would configure that on Twilio's end, and it depends on, how you're trying to filter the calls. If it's just based on phone number, I think that would be a Twilio thing. You would do it on Twilio's end. I don't think we have a way of doing that.
I guess I don't know what ported into Vapi means here, because when I think of telephone number porting, I think of transferring the ownership.
We don't port them. We import them and assign an agent to. The number is still owned by Twilio.
I see. So there's some TWIML that runs on Twilio side. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
But if you wanted to end a conversation based on when the agent picks up, you can, and let's say the person says something, you can have instructions for the agent that say if the agent says, or sorry, if the user says this and the conversation, and it'll hang up the phone. Yeah. And that would be a tool. Yeah.
Is Vapi GDPR, ISO 27001, HIPAA compliant? What's your kind of compliance checkbox list?
Yes, we are. I'm not fully educated on every single one. Is in the docs. I can tell you right now. But yes, we have use cases that require HIPAA. Yeah, GDPR, HIPAA, PCL, and SOC 2. And all of the information on that is in the docs, so you can go read that. But yes, it's very important. And so for HIPAA, we don't retain any call logs.
And somebody's asking about the Web SDK exposing the fact that Vapi is being used under the covers and whether there's a way to wrap that. Since that's also partly a daily question, I would just say that you can build a custom UI, and if somebody looks at the network traffic, they're going to be able to tell some things that are used as services under the covers, but that's true about every service you use.
Yeah.
It's possible I don't understand the question, but that's what I would say. And if you have a different answer, Elizabeth, please jump in.
Yeah, I think people will still be able to see that the API request, like the requests are being, where the requests are being made. But if you, the Web SDK makes it so that you can completely customize the UI and you don't have to mention Vapi anywhere. And you can make sure the agent does not mention Vapi anywhere either.
A little bit related to that, at very large scale, do you have like on-premises installations of Vapi or in VPC for enterprises?
Yeah, some enterprises do. We have clusters just for them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Somebody is asking about multi-tenancy OAuth, but this may be I don't fully understand this question, so this may be async in the Discord as well.
Okay.
Chad, unless you have a sense of what's being asked here.
No, I don't think I was also trying to parse that question and I couldn't quite figure out the angle on it.
Also, how do you think about no-code development versus writing a lot of code for agents? I know Vapi supports at least I would characterize Vapi as supporting both, but I'm interested in how you talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. This is an ongoing discussion within the team because we have a pretty even user split, to be honest with you, which is quite surprising. Like so we have 3 categories. We have people that are completely unfamiliar with code. So like that just prefer a dashboard. And then we have this like vibe coding group where it's like people that will open an IDE, but like they just need a lot of help in navigating the SDKs. And so for that, like I'm thinking a lot about how do we just make it significantly easier for tools like V0 and Lovable to help people build voice agents. And then also just if they're just doing it in Cursor, like how do we make sure that Cursor knows what to do? Because as of right now, like it still obviously sometimes it doesn't do the right thing. And then there's like people that are technical. But for the non-technical side of things, our dashboard right now is just a kind of the surface layer of what the API is capable of. And we're working on that because we're seeing more and more people default to the dashboard, which is very interesting. And we want to have API parity between the dashboard and the API. I think we are far away from having the dashboard be completely representative, but one of the things that is currently in the works is having a split screen between the assistant configuration and code, and then you'll be able to add parameters from the API reference in the dashboard to change the configuration of the assistant for properties that are not available in the dashboard itself. Yeah.
Cool. Are there any Vapi examples showing how to handle system prompts where the system prompt is dynamically adjusted for the specific user that is connecting to the agent?
Interesting. So that's actually a good example that I'd love to just build that out so that people can see. It depends on how you want to modify the system prompt. So we have variables. So if your modification ends on just the name of the person and like some context about the person, you can add that as a variable in the system prompt with a curly brackets. And yeah, it'll then fill that in when starting the call. When you create a call, you can pass those variables in about the user, and then it'll edit the system prompt. And then you can also give it access to a database of like a tool call to a database. in which case when the user calls and provides their information, like their email, for example, you can call an external database, get more context about the user, and then have that be a part of the conversation.
Cool. There's a bunch of questions about Zapier and Innate-In. Custom functions that can be called, hosted, run on those two platforms. Do you support both?
So we support Zapier. There will be more native integration coming, also a little secret, potentially. And so that'll be significantly easier. Is the question around using, like calling Vapi's API in Zapier and Innate-In? Or
one of them is Vapi open to custom functions that are called and are hosted or run on Innate-In or Zapier. I feel like you showed an MCP Zapier example.
Yeah.
Shows that.
Yeah. So if you have an integration on Zapier, you can connect it to Vapi through the MCP, as I showed in the demo. And then in terms of if you want to use Vapi in a workflow on either of those sites, I don't believe there's a native integration right now, but it's in the works.
If the person who asked that question wants to flesh it out a little bit, they're welcome to, but also no pressure, not putting anybody on the spot. Does the API expose all the analytics data that you can see in the dashboard?
Yes.
I love it. I love API first design.
Anything you can see in the dashboard, you will see in the API, and much more. Yeah.
When using the custom LLM pattern, how are concurrent LLM requests during the same phone call handled by Vapi? What's the expectation of concurrency from the custom LLM service?
Wait, can you say that again?
I may not know enough to really frame this question right, but it's when using the custom LLM pattern, how are concurrent LLM requests handled?
Like in one...
I suspect is there a... I presume that in the Vapi dashboard, there's a place where you can configure your own sort of custom LLM service that you're using. And then if you have like multiple users at the same time, like multiple ongoing sessions with different users, I'm guessing the question is, I would presume all of those are just thrown at your custom LLM like in parallel. But
that would be, it would just be thrown at it in parallel, and it would be on your end to handle that.
Cool. No Vapi side. No request buffering or anything on the Vapi side.
No.
Cool. There's a question about guardrails. How do you implement like content guardrails?
You can, the way that we do right now is in the system prompt, and depends on what you mean by guardrails, but yeah, the best way to do it is in the prompt.
Can you use another model as LLM as a judge? Does that pattern exist?
During the conversation?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe so. The best way to do it would be in the system prompt, which works quite well for most use cases, especially if you do it so that, like in the system prompt, that this is very important.
And video avatars. Are you going to add video?
There's been some demos out there. We don't have any plans yet for building this natively, but you can. It is hard, but you can do this on your own.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are the hottest use cases?
The hottest use cases? Depends what we mean by hot. What makes people money currently? A lot of just customer support, some sales, recruiting. Yeah, those are the use cases that I see working really well in production. Anything that is just like automating call centers. Something that I'm excited about is like the insurance space. There's some startups that are working on that. Insurance is very annoying, and if you could automate that with an agent, that'd be very cool. Personally, I'm just really excited for us to push the boundaries of this stuff. Like, I think automating customer support is great, but let's build the future. I want some things that, for example, for the Vapi Build challenge that I listed as what I'm personally excited about is a really good personal assistant demo, like something that has access to everything that I have access to, all of my personal tools that I use on a daily basis, like Notion Calendar, Notion, Slack, I email, everything. And then when I'm, for example, driving or like when I'm walking, if I can get work done or get my life admin stuff out of the way as I'm on a walk or as I'm driving. I think that's very cool, just like a consumer use case. Another thing that I really want is, this is, again, ideas for the build challenge. Get the 10K. Is a vision-based agent. So something that would have access to my screen alongside my voice. This would be, yeah, there's like a ton of use cases for this. My primary one would be debugging. Look at this error. What's wrong? I think that'd be very cool. I'm also excited about like a hardware integration. Yeah, I think that there's just like a ton of fun stuff to be explored there that I would really love to see. Yeah.
Pay attention to what Elizabeth is interested in. You want that 10K, I think, is the lesson here. I think we got through all the things in the Discord that are easy to talk about live. I do think there's some things that are worth coming back and answering async. Chad, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I was also doing a similar scan. Like, I feel like we hit a lot of the, especially like the recurring theme topics that have been coming up in Discord. So yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Elizabeth, thank you so much.
So one second, I wanted to add something.
Yeah.
So my ask for you guys is, I recently started at Vapi, and I'm thinking a lot about making this as easy as possible, as exciting as possible. Like, I just want people to love building agents, and I want people to love building agents on Vapi. So if you are building something, and I'll also go through the Discord I'm sure there's some feedback there as well about stuff not working or ways that we can improve. But if you try out Vapi and you have feedback, please send me a message either through our Discord server, or I'm in the Pudcat Discord server, or my email, elizabeth@vapi.ai, or on Twitter, LIZATRYKIN. I would really appreciate it. And then if you just have our examples or like things that would make it more clear on how to build agents. I'm also rebuilding our docs. And so your requests, this is the prime time to get examples from me on how to build stuff that, you're curious about. So yeah, that's my spiel.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will see you in the Discord and see everybody.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.